So Baruch Hashem, we embarked on a new journey, and this month we're going to be learning the halachas of Daled Minim. And many times when I start giving a shiur, I say, today we have a fascinating sugya, and then I say, did we ever have any sugya that is not fascinating? So, it's a pleasure every time we come to the Kollel. And I was here this week, right? This week. So there are very few Kollelim in the world in which I gave 2 shiurim in the same week, not even in my Kollel. That's a precedent. So Baruch Hashem, and I really hope that when Sukkot comes, you will have the greatest set of Daled Minim ever. So Baruch Hashem. So the topic we will be discussing today is not a halacha mesuyemes in dinei lulav or esrig or hodas or arba, but a general question which is a very fundamental one. And actually, the sources we will be discussing cover 3 out of the 4. I didn't find how to fit in arba, but yes, lulav, esrig, and hodas. So one of the Daled Minim has a psul. Could you fix that psul and rectify and bring it back to kashrus? So years ago, I dealt with this question after regarding a lulav akum. And as I mentioned before, we will not at this stage go into the details what type of akmimus passes a lulav. What is defined as a lulav akum that's possible. But if a lulav is akum, and we could put it under the mattress for a week and try to straighten it out, would that be okay? Would that be a lulav kosher? So many esrogim have these little black dots. And then there are the specialists that use a toothpick or a match or a Q-tip or whatever it is to take off those black dots. So once again, we will not discuss whether those black dots b'chlal pasul. But if they do, and you remove them, is that choizer l'sherik? So the only clear source we find, going all the way back to the Mishnah, is hoyu anovav merubin ma'alav. So hadassim, like many other trees, bear fruit. The fruit is not edible, but they look like little grapes, tiny little grapes. And Chazal say those are anovim, anvei ha'odos. Hoya nova meruba mi'alav, it's posel, im mi'atoi kosher. So this hodas as is, in its natural state, is posel, but you could bring it back to kashrus. If you just pluck off those anovim, and you bring the hodas to a matzav in which hoyu anovav, hoyu alav, merubim ma'anovav, it's choizer l'sheiroi. So would this be a general rule across the board? So there seems to be a machloikes, the Mechaber and Ramah regarding this halacha. Tov reish mem tes sif hey. And this is one of the long seifim in Hilchos Lulav. So the Ramah, and Chosa Kosher V'Shayomim, Nitl Bit Moshe, various different halachas. Im hoyu yovesh, oy menumar, sheposel kol shiva yomim, af im chotach hayaveshus, o hanimur, posel kol shiva. That means, yovesh is posel, kol shiva. But chosa is kosher. So could we just cut out the piece that was dry? And it's no longer yovish. And now it's choser, but choser is kosher. The other days. So the Rambam says, Imo yovish, o menoma, sheposel kol shiva yomim, afem chotach hayav shesuaynim, or posel kol shiva hoya v'bo mekoyach psul. Hoya v'bo mekoyach psul. Which means, if this essay was posel, you can never make it kosher again. And the Mishnah Berurah, Steve Kotlam Ches on the spot says, just a minute, this is a machlokes the Mechaber and the Ramah, which brings us back to some Tov Reish Mem Ches Sif Yud Dalet. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Mama Mordechai, and I think some other Achronim as well, that say, this is not Das Kuli Alma. The Ramah quotes a Gosashi that is possible, but the Mechaber seems to disagree. Because Tov Reish Mem Ches Sif Hey, we have a halacha. Oh, no, it was Tofresh Mem Tes Sif Hey, Tofresh Mem Ches Sif Yud Dalet. Emol Tzavoi Chazozis, Be'inyan Shel Posel, O Shu Menumar, and I want to stress, in both cases we're dealing with Menumar, and that makes matters somewhat more complicated. Im Kishekol Foi Choizel Amara Esek, Kosher. So the Machaber clearly says, if you could peel it off and remove the psul, then choizel echsheroi. So the Mishnah Berurah writes that halach is a machlokes Machaber and Rama, which seems unlikely, because why doesn't the Rama comment on this halacha? So many times, there are kollolim. There are certain rules, kollolim, the derech haksiva of the Machaber and the Rama. So many times, in an earlier source, he states his opinion, and he doesn't need to say it again in a later source, because you should know my opinion from a previous halacha. But Tofresh Mem Ches comes before some Tofresh Mem Tes, and if the Rama maintains that you cannot bring a esrog that was puzzled back to Hechsher, why doesn't he comment here on this Machaber? And it's not reasonable that I'm not going to say anything here, you're going to see it later. No, you should comment the first source. So in Tofresh Mem Ches Sif Yud Dalet, the Machaber says, Im Kisha Kol Foi Choizel Amara Esrog Kosher. And then there's, in parentheses, La'achar Sheniklaf, V'lo Yichoser Klum. Most of the times this is the Rama, but not always. If it's the Rama, it should say Hagah. The Be'er Hagoyle added on Hagos to the Shulchan Aruch and some other Gedolim throughout the ages. If it's not in the Darkei Moshe, it might not be the Rama. And I do not recall whether this is from the Darkei Moshe or not. But if it is the Rama, not only doesn't he disagree with the Machaber, he actually explains the Machaber. And if he explains the Machaber, that means that he agrees to this halacha. So, is there a machlokes between the Machaber and the Rama, like the Mishnah Berurah maintains, and pulled some of the earlier Achronim? Or maybe there would be no stira between these two halachas. So maybe there would be a difference between a psul begufa esrog and a psul sha'al ha'esrog. And there are various different types of psulim. So when it's yovesh, that means the esrog is a psul beguf ha'esrog. But if it is only chazozis is on the outer level, and you could peel it off, it's not a psul begufoi. And maybe in that case it's not shaykh the agdora hoyel v'bo mikoyach psul. So that's the agdora that Rama writes in Siman Tofresh Mem Tes, when he says if you cut off that piece, the esrog will never be kosher again. Hoyel v'bo mikoyach psul. So maybe there's a difference between a psul begif esrog and a psul which is just b'mara esrog on top. Psul she'al gufoi, psul begufoi. But in both halachas we talk about menumar. And menumar probably would be the same. And menumar is usually in the outer level. So, do we have any other way to reconcile Tofresh Mem Ches and Tofresh Mem Tes and maintain that it might not be a stira? Because if it would be a stira, it would be a machlokes, then the Rama would comment here. And the Mogen Avraham would comment, and the Taz would comment, and they don't see a machlokes between these two halachas. So Tofresh Mem Tes Sif Hey, when the Rama says Hoyel v'bo mikoyach psul, he quotes a Goas Rashi, and the Goas Rashi writes, it is nikar that this esrog was fixed, and that's why it's possible. Goas Rashi writes nikar v'mous, and that is an interesting svara. So the difference would be when you peel off part of the hour level, not always is it nikar, but you cut a piece off an esrog, that is always obvious. Choser is kosher, but if the reason you cut off the piece is because there was a psul, einay choser lehechsheroi. So this is somewhat of an interesting halacha, which to a certain level seems to be like a Gzeres HaKosav. It defies pure logic. You have two esrogim, both are missing a little piece. They both look the same. This is kosher and this is kosher. This is kosher because the reason you cut off that piece is what you were desperately hungry. And you wanted to eat a piece of an esrog, so you cut off a piece and you weighed it up, and the esrog is kosher. Esrog number 2 looks the same as esrog number 1. The reason you cut off that piece is because it was yovish or it was menoma, and that's possible. When you peeled off, that's kosher because it's not nikar. It's not obvious. But it's never obvious why I cut off that piece. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So, if the reason it's posted is because it's mos, how could two esrogim that look exactly the same and both have a little piece missing, this is not more mos than that one, at least not lamara ayin, but the factor is nikar, and that's mufurish in a gozosh. And that would be the difference. And that is why Tofresh Memtes, it is nechtach. Tofresh Memches, it is niklaf. And that's the difference between these two halachas. So sometimes the nimur, the shinui mara, is deeper. And it's not only in the outer level. You could peel off the outer level, but the ketem, the shinui mara is still there. And you need to cut deeper. If you cut deeper, it is nikar, and that's why it's possible. Niklaf is kosher. So the difference between Tofresh Memches, in which the Mechaber says kosher, and the Ramah does not disagree, and Tofresh Memtes, in which the Ramah also goes actually posel, is nikar, and that is mufurish. So the Bekuri Yankiv says this svara, Sivkon Chofei, and it is mufurish in Hagos Arshi. So that definitely is the factor, and that is the way we understand. And you plucked off those anovim, it's not nikar. There's no way a person would know that there were more anovim and they were taken off. And because it's not nikar, so what about a lulav akum? And we straightened it out, kosher. Because right now, it's a lulav yosher, it's not a lulav akum. So that would be kosher. I think there is another svara to differentiate between a lulav akum that we managed to straighten out and all the other psulim. Because a lulav akum is the same lulav. It's just the tzura. It's just form. It's not a psul begufadavar like all the others, whether it's yovish or menumar or even another meruba ma'arav. There's something wrong with the guf hadara, whether it's the hadas or mashenkin ulavako. But realizing that the psul is nikar, so that is the factor. If it's nikar, it's possible. Even though in no way would it be nikar, why we cut off this piece? So this is an interesting halacha which I can't really explain, and it seems to be somewhat like a hilchasa, nikar v'mos. So could I have a Gemara Sukkah? Let's just recheck the lashon of that Shlit. Because I do think that he also stresses that it's mos, and that would be somewhat of a chiddush. So naturally, Pei Gimel, Simen Chav Gimel. Kosev Rabio. Es komish v'menumar shu posel. Em chotach masho yovesh. Komish v'menumar. V'shir hashar sholem. Sheposel avoracholov kivin shabo mekoyach psil v'mos. V'yafol gav de imiyat anovav. V'bo mekoyach apsul kosher. Hosel mishem de einanik or hamiyud. ויש שגודל בוי ענבים Arba, ויש שגודל בוי מעט. So it's not nikar. Nikar v'mos. So mos is a relative idea because the very same esig, if you cut off a piece, and the reason you cut off a piece is not because it has a psul, then it's kosher. So it's not that the psul is nikar. What is nikar is that this esig was tampered with. You don't know why. So this is very interesting, especially when he adds on the mos. Why would that be more mos than a similar esig with a similar piece cut off? And that's not mos, and this is mos. So I think the more important agdora is bo mekoyach psul. So this mos is a relative type of mos, not like mos that we find in other sources of halacha. But what is clear is, it all depends, nikar or eina nikar. So we have two sources of Shulchan. Obviously, we need to assume niklaf is eina nikar, nechtach is nikar, anovav meruba ma'alav eina nikar, and that's why it's kosher. And this would be the fundamental rule regarding all the other halachas of Dalet Minim.
Even though the Ramah, whoever the Hagon in Tafish and Chesru says v'loy chaser klum, Pashtus niklaf. I don't know which niklaf, but many niklaf are usually quite nicker. Maybe it's less nicker. I don't know exactly. Esrog niklaf, you see, it's missing its shekhal yonah.
I think it's not nikar. Many times an esrog is niklaf due to normal use, and not intentionally. Nechtach is always somebody cut off a piece, and we wonder why he cut off a piece. I think niklaf, even if niklaf is nikar, but it's not necessarily that somebody tampered with it. Niklaf is usually not intentionally niklaf. But when an esig is choser, it is obvious somebody cut off a piece, and we wonder why. So,
is the nearest then on the
if
person?
the reason he cut off a piece is because it was puzzle, then it is mos. What?
I said, is the mos the nearest shabbat on the person or on the maisa, not on the esrog?
It definitely is on the esrog. I think every mos would be on the chefza.
Well, I know, but that's why the Rav said, I have two esrog in front of me, they look exactly the same. So I don't know, but if you look objectively what happened, so I know why he's makshering his or trying to, and the other guy just the rest of the esrog.
And that is why I think this halacha is somewhat baffling, because mos is always about the chefza. However, not always is mos what is obvious. So that's it. That's what I wanted to mention. Sandals shel avodah zorah, lulav shel avodah zorah, and we find mos because it was from avodah zorah. Even though when you see it, people would know it comes from avodah zorah. But if you know it comes from avodah zorah, and that is mos. So, im kain, why is niklaf not possible? So why is hoy anova v'miatoy anova? Why is it not possible? So this is a combination. On one hand, it needs to be nikar, unlike San Shalom, which is not nikar at all. So the concept of mos is not the same in different sugyas. So sometimes, many times, we know how to learn halacha even though we don't know ad soifim shadvorim to explain, but what is clear in this halacha, the defining factor is your tikkun, is it nikar or is it eina nikar? Even though, to a sragim, exactly the same deficiency, same choser, this is kosher, and this is kosher. Hoyel v'bo mekoyach psul. So we can't ignore the reisha of this halacha, which is both in the Mosashri and quoted by the Mo. Hoyel v'bo mekoyach psul, the Mos. So I don't have more of an explanation, but I know what they say, even though it's a chiddush. It's a certain tzorachim.
When the psul is in the gufa esrog, meaning a chelik of the esrog, which is the emes a chelik of the esrog, in Tafresh Memtes, it's chaser, which is possible in your rishons. It's a chelik esrog. It's a hilchas of that chaser is kosher shayom. By niklaf, niklaf are more like the anovim of the hadas, which are a non-crucial part of it. They don't really belong there. We don't need them for the kiyam mitzvah. Maybe if it's a chelik, that's a chelik of a kiyum mitzvah was nifsal, so then that's it. It was already shtempeled. Then it would be shver by the akkup.
Maybe. So the Rosh Kollel wants to differentiate between I have a problem with the comparison between Niklaf and Anova Meru and Ma'alav. Because Niklaf is kosher Yom Rishon. Anova Meru and Ma'alav is supposed to call Shiva. So you say, but the Anovim were never an essential part of the Hodos. It was always something that is not part of the Hodos. So you just remove something that was never really a part of the mitzvah. And the same to Niklaf. Because Esleg and Niklaf is kosher Yom Rishon. Masha Enkein, part of the esrig. Would that depend whether an esrig shechosa is a psul in hodor, or is it only lekichatama, and that's a machlokes on Rishonim? So Tosfos maintains hodor is called shiva, lekichatama only day number one. The Ran and some other Rishonim say no. Hodor gufo, it is up to Chazal. Some Psulim Hodor are called Shiva, some Psulim Hodor are only first day. And Chosar, according to some Rishonim, including the Ran, is a Psul in Hodor. So if it's a Psul in Hodor, I think it's more reasonable to say that is more Mois and it's Bo Makoy Psul. If it's a Psul in the Kichatame, so what does the first day have to do with the other days? Kichatame is only day number one, not the other days. Where else do we find in halacha a physical blemish that might or might not be fixed? So just recently, I wrote 2 different shuvas in the halachas of Psuadaka and Khrushchev. And the questions I dealt with was a person that had a vasectomy, which is renders a person a Khrushchev when the vas deferens is severed, and that is the shvil hazera. But today in microsurgery, you could fix that, and you could take the 2 parts of the vessel that was severed and sew them together. So it's a psul shechoiza lehechshera, and it's a big discussion. And most of Minim say, if you could fix the problem, you fix the problem, and he's no longer a Khrushchev. And that is what I paskin more than once, and I wrote many shuvas regarding these halachas. So the Yerushalmi differentiates between a Psuadak and a Khrushchev, and in the Bavli as well. But the Yerushalmi says, Hilchas HaRoifim, depends on the doctors. If it could be fixed, it could be fixed. So obviously there, it's not about Gzeras Sakos of Hilchas She'ein Botaim, Hilchas of Roitam, but it depends. Could he have children or can't he have children? So if his mum could be fixed, and once again he would be able to have children, then Choyzalach Sheiroi. But in Yevomesayim Vovamedalev, Chazal compare Khrushchev to Treifis. So if an animal has one of Chai Treifis, and then we fixed it, Nikav Krum Shel Moyach, or Nikvu Hama'ayim, or other Psulei Treifis. And going back 2,000 years, there wasn't much surgery going on, but Nistam, there was an Ekev, and then by natural process, it healed. And the Gemara says, Einer Choyzalech Sheroi. And the Gemara says, by Khrushchev, if you fix it, Choyzalech Sheroi. But regarding Teifus, Einer Choyzalech Sheroi. In Pashtus, the explanation would be, do we understand why this is a psul? So by Khrushchev is all about, if he has a mum that renders it impossible for him to have children, that's the psul of Khrushchev. Even though if it's b'dei shamayim, he's kosher. So the reason of this halacha is not entirely clear, because solas v'dei shamayim is kosher l'bekona. So on one hand, there is this factor of exeas hakosuf, but there still is reasoning. By treifis, it's all exeas hakosuf. But the Gemara says treifa lo chaya. Treifa lo chaya is just to define that he's considered a treifa. But it's not the reason. So if an animal is desperately ill, that is the din of Misakenes. And a Misakenes is going with the Shlit. It's not Moktzeh Yom Tov. So Misakenes is kosher. So the reason a treifa is possible, and it's treifa, is not because it can't live, but because it's halacha l'Moshe Messinai, like all the other halachas of Machalas Asurais, which are all Gzeres Gezalti v'Nachurishus L'Haracharayim. So the Gemara differentiates between treifas that can never be choizer lech sheiroi, and kushavcha, which is choizer lech sheiroi. And Churan Ayinvov, I just quoted Yevamah Ayinvov. Churan Ayinvov Amid Aleph. Nechtecho regel min arkuva velamata. If an animal had his leg cut off, if it's above the knee, treifa. Under the knee, kosher. One of the chai treifas is tzumas agidin, and that is the tendons of your ankle, an animal's ankle or a bird's ankle, and that is the tzumas agidin. If the tzumas agidin are severed, the behemoth treifa, could you just cut off the entire leg from the knee down? So this animal no longer has tzumas agidin. Would it be kosher or not? That's a machlokes Lashon Ramban. The Ramban says no, because we learn in Yevamah Ayinvov treifas einam choizer lech sheiroi. The Rosh argues this is different. We're not fixing what was damaged. We're just removing it.
The Esrog also.
What?
The Esrog case also. We didn't. The Esrog case also. When there was Menuma, we didn't fix it. We just removed it.
Before we come back to Esrog, let's deal with treifas. So if it's a nekev, and the nekev was healed, so the Gemara says that's not choizer lech sheiroi. Once this blemish was affected the animal, and it became treifa, and it can never become kosher again, even though the mum was healed. So the Ramban says, if you cut off the leg, but this behemoth was a treifa, this chicken was treifa. The Rosh says this is different. It's not that we fixed it so much again. We just cut off the leg. So how could it be? An animal that had its leg removed is kosher, and this animal had its leg removed because there was a problem with Sumas again, then it's treifa. So if you say, this is halacha l'Moshe Messinai, these are Gzeres HaKosers, then why would there be a difference? So, this is an interesting phenomenon. And if we come back to Esrog and Lulav, then there might be a difference between having a lulav and straightening it out, or cutting off a piece that's yovish. Cutting off a piece that's yovish, if we compare treifas to Dalad Minim, would be depend on the Rosh and the Ramban. And a lulav okum would be worse, because by treifas, if you're fixed, then so obviously these halachas are not comparable. And each and every one of these halachas has its own set of rules. Treifas l'chud, krushavcha l'chud, and dalad minim l'chud. And we should not compare one with the other.
Shofar.
Oh, that's great. Shofar, we have beferish halachas that it could be fixed. So, yeah, I didn't think of shofar. That would be another source to this discussion. So once again, shofar, it all depends. Does it affect the kollel, or it does not affect the kollel?
By shofar, Rashi holds that the Psulim is be'etzem, if the tzedek is there, that it's two shofars. And somehow glue is going to make it come back and make it into one shofar and we'll kasher it. So would we be able to apply glue to the law of Muslim?
I think that just proves what I said, that we cannot compare these halachas one to another. Shofar l'chud, treifa l'chud, krushavcha l'chud. So when we deal with the questions of dalad minim, we need sources of dalad minim. And I think dealing with the source of dalad minim, we clearly define. It all depends, nikar or einoi nikar.
For the Buddha who's not there, it says Yatero Lamalo, and Nifridil. Is that considered if we do a psul, and now when you're tying it, you're making a kosher?
In the first mission, Luba Gazal, Machokis Tanakam review the Nifru, we hold Nifru kosher, saying Nifru do possible, if you review the Pashas Nifru possible. You can then on the mile to fix it. It's kosher, Ali David.
Yeah.
And it's a short hikr. Kosher.
So if the psul is Mitzad Hodor, then if you could fix it, then it comes back to be Hodor. That would be a question. I don't know, but that's a very good question. Obviously, when you fix something by removing it, it is Bo Mekoyach HaPsul. But maybe Yagderem Anamala.
More like straightening out an knuckle.
Yeah. Yes.
The odd thing we do learn from Shlit by our Minim.
What?
The odd thing we do learn, like the guy Arba, and Nishra Ashidra, that we do learn from Shlit. So,
It's a friend is somebody that wrote. That's what comes from the market.
Okay, so Tov Reish Mem Hey. How far did you? This is Mamish the beginning. That's the beginning. Yes. So the Mogen Olam Sivkot Beis does right. Im Hasheder V'atzma Nifretzo V'Nishbaro V'Tluya Lamata Nereli Dekosho. Dafka Barav Alav Posel. The Dober V'Hemish V'Nishbaro Rav Tzaliseu Treifo. V'Nishbaro Hashedro Sheiron. I would dare to say it's not that we learn Dinei Lulav from Treifus. No. The Mogen just means to bring a comparison. Because we don't find it's possible. And if Chazal don't say posel, it's not posel. And if you will wonder, nifret se'el posel, nishber ha'sheder kosher, motzinu ken, ze b'treifes. Exactly the same. The ribs are attached to the sheder. Nishber ha'seder treifa, nishber ha'sheder kosher. It's a dimyan. It's a comparison. It's not that we learn the halachas of lulav from the halachas of treifa.
the friend said possible because it's like Nishra Chut Ashidra. Like Nifsach Kachut. They learn there is a psul from there.
What did you quote right now? What did you quote? Whom did you quote right now? All I see is the Mogen Avraham. Im nishbaro, im hashedra b'atzma nifratzo, v'nishbaro v'tluya lamata nereli dekosho. The dafke barov alam posel. The doma levahemish shenishbaro rov tzalisei utreifo, v'nishbaro hashedra k'sheiro.
The Mishnah brings that point in Baruch Tzil, the base name.
That what?
Pri begotten on the spot asks then by sheder, even by sheder by behemoth, if the chut hasheder is nifsak faka treif. So when the sheder of the wool is broken, it's azoivi with the chut hasheder, so it's a bad tushla b'chal. It's a bad comparison. There's a halach over there.
And so they argue against
Yeah,
the
a
psak,
lot of achrim argue on the.
and that is their reasoning.
That's one of them. Yeah. I think some achrim just think the whole thing with the treif is wrong.
Okay. So in today's shiur, I learned more than I taught. And I see this halacha is more complicated than I thought it is. And that's the tachlis of giving shiurim in a good kollel. That's the benefit you have. Any other sources?
That's clear. The Masham says that if Mechkat Yomis, even if it's ruba, it's possible to feed all those Rishonim, even at the Chomer Mutai, you take glue and glue up the thing to the top.
Yes.
He says the other psulim also, he says Hamlet you could put in glue and fix it.
Yeah, that is a big discussion. So I think there would be a difference between the three fundamental halachas, the three sources we have which is Toflish Memches Niklaf, Nechtach, Anova Meru B'Ma'alav, in which the way you fix something is by just, you didn't really fix it, you removed part of it. Masha Enkein, by Nechel Kwatioimis or Hemnik, if you fix it and you brought it back to its original state, the way it normally would be, that's not Buma Koyach Psulim, and that would be kosher.
The Korean you just saw that. But that would be different to all of course, the halacha the same as if you have a shear that's not nifr two and the bottom it is nifr two, so it's kosher because you can cut it off as every time sagidin. Kanir la halacha we pass in that same as sagidin is similar involved in your day is not kosher.
Like the Rosh.
He says if since in year to yachtle choysa yoysa shalamash give it al shiur
and he writes you don't even need to cut it off.
yeah because you could.
Where's the B'Kuri Yankiv?
Yeah, Kuri Yankiv.
Toflish Memhei? No.
Yeah.
Sifkot Dalet? Okay, so I have a lot of homework. Yes, Shikoyach.